It is pressed. There we go. We're recording. Um, just so we can all remember this wonderful time that we're about to share together. But let's introduce ourselves. Varick, please be my guest.
All right. So, hello. My name is Varick Harris. I am one of the assistant deans of admission here at Reed College. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm also a Reed alum. I graduated in 2019 and got my degree in biochemistry.
Marvelous. My name is Grace Fisher. I use any pronouns. I am an associate dean of admission here at Reed College. I did not attend Reed. I grew up locally and was eager to try something different for college, but clearly I have come back to my hometown. And I've been at Reed for about 4 years now. So I like to think I know the place pretty well. So what we're going to be doing today, first, just some orientation of the space. If you haven't been in a Zoom webinar before, you'll see there's a chat at the bottom of your screen, and then there's also a Q&A. And the chat can be fun for, like, I don't know if you watch Twitch stream, but like, interacting with each other and stuff. But you might notice that there's 170 folks here, so it'll be hard for us to keep track of that. So if you have a question for me or Varick, the best way to do it is put it in the Q&A. When I'm talking, Varick will be checking on the Q&A, and when he's talking, maybe I'll take a look. We probably won't be able to get to everything, but we'll do our best to answer questions, especially ones that we think lots of people might have. So that doesn't mean, don't use the chat, but it's just harder to keep track of. So Q&A is the best way to get a question in front of our eyes. Now, as for what we're doing the rest of the time, this is a case study, and what we're trying to show you here is to help you understand a little bit about how colleges make decisions, what is important to them, what is not important to them, and kind of what is the thinking process, what are all the things going on once you submit your application to a college, that some of which you might know about, some of which you definitely won't. And I think what you'll end up learning is both that there are some places as you go, I assume a lot of you are seniors, as you start to write your college applications, there are some things that you have control of that you can write in a way that will really present yourself well. And there are also some things that happen in the college admission process that affect your application that have nothing to do with you. And that can feel like kind of a bummer at first. Like, I can't control the fact that this school really needs a trombone player or whatever. But hopefully it can also give you a little bit of relief in that, like, sometimes a college makes a decision to like admit or not admit someone. And it's like, it's nothing to do with the judgment of how good a student you are or anything like that. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at at a school profile. So today, Varick and I are coming from the perspective of Reed. I've also worked at 2 other universities, but I think we want to sort of talk a little bit more generally about how colleges, what kind of colleges' institutional priorities are, and so we're going to use a fictional university called Jefferson University. And we're going to take a look at the profile of Jefferson because the thing is, each college is actually looking for different things. And looking at a school profile can sometimes help you understand a little bit more about what matters to a school and what they might be looking for in their student body. So I'm going to share a screen, and then I'm going to duck out for about 10 seconds to go get a charger for this computer because I am a professional who definitely forgot that. So Varick, I'm going to ask you to take point on kind of going through this this school profile. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Awesome. Here we go.
All right. So, everybody, welcome to a school profile. This is essentially what every school should have. So you should be able to go to any college, any university. You can go to their website. These are usually pretty, or should be made pretty, readily easy for a student like yourself to find. And what a school profile is essentially going through all of the most important information related to that institution. So it gives a little bit of background, a little bit of history, it goes over, basic facts about just like enrollment numbers. It can also be used to give you a little bit of insight into, some of the more major recent developments. So this is a school profile for Jefferson University. As we said, it is a fictional school, and we're going to use it today for our case studies. So big things to note about Jefferson University, the things that really stand out in this school profile. Founded in 1856, Jefferson University is a selective private university located 30 minutes from a major urban city. So right off the bat, right, there's one word that stands out in that first sentence, which is selective. Jefferson is a more selective school. Generally speaking, schools that use the term selective generally have an admission rate that hovers around, I want to say like 40-ish%, like 35, 40% of applicants are admitted.
And we see at the bottom of the page, we actually get its exact selectivity. 33%.
33%. So maybe I was a little optimistic with my range. But definitely keep in mind when you're looking at schools, and a school says we're selective, or if a school says like highly selective, you're generally looking at a place that's going to have admission rates around a third of all applicants or less.
Absolutely. And so as you read through this, if you're just taking a look on your screen, I know if you're on a phone, it'll be hard to read. I'm sorry, I don't have a great solution for that. But a lot of this, as your eyes might glaze over, right? Because it might look like, yeah, every university says stuff like this. And that's true. A lot of universities sound pretty similar to each other. But I think we can pick out some themes here that are helpful in understanding what Jefferson might look for. So I see at least twice we get liberal arts institution. So when a college is describing itself as a liberal arts college, and Reed is one of these, Varick, how does that change what they might look for in their students?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was just having a conversation with a student yesterday about like, what does it mean to go to a liberal arts college? And I think one of the biggest things is that there's this idea that's very prevalent amongst all liberal arts colleges where, we want you to have a pretty well-rounded background. And there's a little bit less importance in terms of, you're applying to just one thing. So like, let's say you're interested in, I don't know, astrophysics, right? There's a lot of physics that you need to know. There's a lot of math that you need to know. But when applying to a liberal arts college, we're also hoping that you will have taken, classes in history or classes in English, not only taking classes in those studies, but also taking classes that are, more rigorous across all realms of your education. So instead of just being like amazing at just one thing, the goal is, hopefully when you apply, you'll be and have a lot of breadth to the rigorous parts of all of your studies.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I'm seeing a couple other things here. And one of them is a word that you probably haven't heard of. A highly successful capital campaign has resulted in brand new athletic facility, renovated dormitories, and new museum of art on campus. Capital campaign means the college set a goal to raise a certain amount of money, and hopefully they raised it. It says it was successful, so they did. Varick, what do you think happens when a college spends a bunch of money on something?
They want students to use it.
That is right.
It would be a shame if the college raised all this money, built a brand new athletic facility, and then nobody's using it. So this could be, same thing with the Museum of Art, right? This could be a sign that Jefferson is looking for more students that are interested in competing on sports teams, or more art students to take advantage of the museum that's on campus.
Absolutely. I'm also seeing, let's see, guaranteed housing for 4 years, 95% of students live on campus. And a lot of selective colleges do have a very high rate of residency. A lot of students living on campus is really common. And what that does change, I think, for colleges is, or the way that affects what a college might be looking for is that they're not just thinking about, is this student going to show up in the classroom? They're also thinking about, people got to live with you. So are you pleasant to live with? And not just are you, tolerable, but how will you contribute to building community on campus? What kind of community member are you going to be? One of the reasons colleges care about your extracurriculars is not just like they're looking for the people with the longest or most impressive list. It's like they're looking for students who are going to make student life more lively, more fun, more interesting, more, supportive, whatever the school's values are. So this tells me that as Jefferson, we would be paying attention to how students spend their time outside of class and what kind of community members there's going to be. Finally, we get to some of the statisticals. So 33% of applicants admitted, 45% from public schools and 55% from independent or religious schools. Interviews not required, but highly recommended. Obviously, this was a case was written a little while ago, or this fake profile was written a little while ago, but this is telling us that a lot of their students come from private schools, and colleges often, a lot of colleges especially these days, might be feeling like we want to take more students from public schools to sort of bring in students from more diverse backgrounds. In terms of the numbers that we're getting here, not every school ranks these days. If your school doesn't rank, that's totally fine. But what this is showing us is that about a third of the students are in the top quintile, which means the top 20% of their class. Mm-hmm. So if every 1 in 3 students is in the top 20%, 2 in 3 students are in the top 60%. Very few students are in the bottom half of their class. It's very uncommon for students. So these are good students, as you'd expect from a selective school. Average GPA of 3.6. We don't know if that's weighted or unweighted, but that's telling me these are students who get A's and B's and more A's than B's. We're also seeing some middle 50% here. Vera, can you explain a little bit about how middle 50s work?
Yeah, totally. So essentially, it's a relatively simple thing where the middle 50% of students that applied had a test score that was between that range. So half of all the students had a SAT, or I'll use ACT, had an SAT between 28 and 32. In addition, what middle 50% is kind of also alluding to is that, there's another 25% of students that had a score above a 32 on the ACT. But there's also another 25% of students that had a score below the 28. A lot of colleges will use middle 50 percentages to kind of give you a rough estimate of averages, but it's always important to note that there will be people that go, above that range, as well as people that are below.
Oh, Varric, it's been asked that you could be sure to speak loud, and I'll try to do my best to do that too. Super. So right now, Reed and some other schools are not using tests as much. But I think, since there are plenty of schools that still do use tests, it's useful to think about where your scores might fall if you do take a standardized test. And the nice thing about middle 50 is you always know if you're below that middle 50, hey, so is 25% of the other people that they took. Okay, so we built a picture of Jefferson. I think what we've learned, if I can summarize, this is a school that's interested in students who are doing well in multiple classes across the curriculum. So they'll be good liberal arts students who are contributing to their community. Maybe they're especially looking for student athletes right now, or students interested in the arts. And academically talented students who are not just getting good grades, but getting good grades in the context of their school too. Anything I missed, VH?
No, I think that's about it. I do think it's important as we kind of move into the next step of this process, to keep all of that in mind, right? Like definitely be thinking about everything that we just discussed and how, the priorities of Jefferson relate to the students that we're about to evaluate, and how, whether or not they fit what Jefferson is looking for.
And I would also add, sometimes there are priorities that don't even appear on the school profile, but maybe let's say I'm the dean of admissions of Jefferson University. I get a call from the president of the university who says, "Hey, Professor Cerveny just won this amazing, $5 million grant to continue her work studying zebrafish eye cells. So we really got to make sure that we're getting students who will be great for working in her lab. So we're prioritizing biology students this year," right? That kind of thing can happen behind the scenes. You don't even know it. So colleges are thinking of a lot more than just who is this person on paper in front of me. That said, let's take a look at some fake students that we made up. We can start looking at what real applications look like. Real fake applications. And we're going to start with the lovely Rachel Siegel. Okay, so this is what the Common App looks like pretty much when it comes through to us. Obviously, this is an older one. It's blue now, big change. But generally speaking, I think it can be kind of cool to know what the Common App looks like. And actually, when you fill out the Common Application, there should be an option to preview it yourself. So that can be kind of fun. You can read through and be like, what is someone going to see when they see my file? Now, every school will read stuff in a different order, but I think on each page, the way I think of reading an application is that I am taking all of these pieces of information in and starting to build a picture of this person. And each page gives me more, a new shade of color for that picture, if we want to use an extended metaphor. So, and it'll be even different within the school, Anupam, which pages, different counselors might start on a different page, depending on what they like. So from this first page, I'm getting a sense of Rachel's background, where she lives, her ethnic background, languages. I also see that she requested a fee waiver. So this is a student who maybe has grown up with some economic challenges in her family. And next, I do see more about her family and see that she's the daughter of a single mom who works at a restaurant and didn't go to college. Secondary means that she graduated high school. Has an older brother who went to Jefferson. That's kind of interesting. So that tells me that this is a family where she may not have had all of the resources at home of someone telling her, parents who knew how college works in the US, right? But there does seem to be an expectation in this family that you are going to go to college. And maybe she's applying to Jefferson because that her brother's really happy there, or was really happy there. Next page, we see students educate. And I want to remind you, it's easier for us to look at your questions if you use the Q&A function. So next page we see is education. a little bit about your high school, and importantly, we see what classes you're taking this year. So we see full year classes here: English, French, art history, honors pre-calc, bio. So I'm already saying, oh, this is a student who's taking a pretty solid load. But I also don't know in her high school, is this a normal schedule? Is this a really hard schedule? Like kind of where it fits in compared to other students who go to this school. So that'll be something I'll be looking out for. Interestingly, I also see that her weighted rank is really high. She's 14 out of 548. So she's a really competitive student. So that to me indicates that this is probably a strong schedule at her school. You don't get that higher rank if you're taking easy classes, weighted. Got some honors. She's interested in doing religious studies. That's kind of neat. On the next page, we see her testing. And we see that she took the ACT twice, and her highest score is a 23. So we do remember that our university, Jefferson University, had a pretty high, mid 50 score range. I think it was 28 to 32. So when I see Rachel has a 23, what that's telling me is, okay, Rachel's score may not be kind of where most of our students that we admit are at, but I also saw earlier that she has really good grades. So, and a really good rank. So she's probably doing well within her school. So I'm not going to say like, oh, we're not admitting her because she has a 23, right? I'm just going to read through the whole application and see what is there that allows me to get really excited about for Rachel, that would say, hey, we want to take the student who's outside of our normal range. Got a 4 on APUS, so that's great. And then we see activities. So Varick, what do you notice when you look at this activities list? What stands out to you?
Yeah, and actually, I just answered a question in the Q&A section about activities, where a student was like, "What if I really focus on excelling at school, but potentially don't participate a lot in extracurriculars?" And Rachel seems to do a lot of extracurriculars, but right off the bat, you can kind of notice that firstly, a lot of the things are through the school. So if you're doing anything through the school, that's totally okay. The next thing I noticed is that most of these activities have been completed by Rachel for multiple years, which I think is something to really focus on. Most colleges definitely want, more than anything, to see in your activities list things that you have showed like a consistent effort of engaging with. So a lot of things on Rachel's list started, her freshman year and have continued all throughout her time in high school. All of the things in general, there's, everything from community service to a lot of, more arts, especially performing arts. That is totally cool. We love to see that, especially if you're a student that maybe is interested in, continuing your love for the performing arts when you get to college. And there's a lot of, more, I guess, volunteering aspects here, and helping things. So like at the top of this list, Rachel formed a musical group that visits residents at, Jewish elderly homes. It was a pretty amazing thing to do in your spare time. So it doesn't just have to be, this is exactly what I said. You don't have to be captain of 8 different, sports teams. You don't have to be president of 12 different clubs. What's most important is you use this activities list to kind of showcase the things that you are really passionate about, and do really care about.
Awesome. Yeah, I echo everything that Varick said. I'm seeing this, and I'm seeing a student who's really committed, does her activities for 4 years, and who makes things happen, and that's really valuable on a college campus, is someone who sees a need and says, I want to fill that need. So I'm getting excited about Rachel here.
Oh, also, this is a quick, COVID, how will colleges look at
Oh, good cue.
extracurriculars in the wake of the pandemic? That's a really good question. So, we went through this with you all. I don't want anyone to think that, colleges aren't aware of all of the struggles that have happened this past year. We will definitely keep that in mind, right? If it looks like there's a bit of a break in your activities, right? Like 11th grade or 10th grade, things kind of shut down, and you weren't able to do as many things, that's okay. But I do want to note that all of you have been doing more than you think you have throughout the course of the pandemic.
So true.
Like,
Yeah,
think about, things that are potentially feel small to you, like can be a big deal to us.
Yeah, I would agree. I think students often are worried about bragging too much. Most of the time, the problem is that you don't brag enough. So Jenna asked if non-competitive or non-institutional activities should be included. Definitely. If we're interested in how you build and interact with community, but we also just want to know, like, how do you spend your time? What do you care about? What matters to you? And so one of those things can definitely be scuba diving or baking bread or embroidery or whatever. We're trying to build a whole picture of you as a human being. So if that's some solo stuff that you do, that's great. If it's stuff like caring for family members, I really value learning about that too. Okay. Want to keep moving. So we've gotten some other good questions. Some of them will be answered shortly. But first, we're going to take a look at Rachel's essay. So I will give us, a short amount of time for everyone to take a look at this. I think I'm as zoomed in as I can. Yeah, I can't zoom in anymore. All right, this is as zoomed in as we're getting. There we go. And while you're reading, I'll answer some cues. Once you're done, maybe put in the chat kind of what you feel you learned about Rachel from this essay. Yeah. Interested in helping people, passionate about music, driven, empathetic. Belle, I love what you said there, thinks about the future. I think that's really, I found that really interesting in here. She's not just like, I want to do this while I'm here, but this is doing enough good that it should keep happening. So she's planning forward. Um, yeah, inspired, caring, finds purpose in everything she does. Yeah, I think it is a clever way to tell her story, Rohan. Um, so yeah, I think this is a pretty good essay. Um, we're learning what she cares about. We're learning how she thinks about other people, and we're learning how those go together. So when I think about what Jefferson University is looking for, I'm seeing, oh, this is a student who would have a lot to add. This is a student who, again, sees a need and fills it. That's someone that I get excited about. Yeah, I'm glad that you all agree. It's a good essay. um, so next up, so I'm getting excited about Rachel. I've got that test score in the back of my head as something to think about. But in general, so far I haven't seen her transcript yet, but I'm guessing that she's a good student and seems to have a really good heart. She's passionate and she acts on the things that she cares about. So some of you were asking earlier about the school report and how we know what's a competitive or strong schedule within a particular school. So every school or most colleges will request what's called a school report from your school. Nowadays, they're usually not filled out by hand, but this is a document that helps us understand what your school is like. I'll also say most of the time at selective colleges and universities like Reed and Jefferson, your application is going to be read by someone who's an expert in where you are from, whether that is from Tennessee or Washington State or an international student even. So I actually used to be the Washington counselor. So I look at this, I might not even need to read this because if we got a lot of applications from Pugetville or Puget View High School, I'd already know this stuff. But if this was a brand new school to me and I'm skimming it, I'm seeing, okay, 45% of students go to four-year schools. That's sort of a middling percentage in the US, but at a selective college like Reed or like Jefferson, probably a lot of the students, remember, a lot of them are coming from private schools, and most of those students are going to four-year high schools. So this is a student who's not necessarily immersed in what's called a college-going culture. Not everyone around her goes to college. It's not necessarily expected. And we saw that in her family too. We also see that this school has 5 AP classes and 7 honors classes. So that will help me understand what was available to her. So when I look at her schedule, I can assess how much did she challenge herself. I don't know what that is. Okay. So we're seeing that class rank again. We're seeing her GPA. Counselors rating her as excellent. That looks good. Honestly, most students are rated somewhere in here, and I don't usually think of it as a huge difference if they're in one section or the other. It's only if you're in the kind of average below average section that I might be have a question mark. No disciplinary history. All right. So I've learned about Rachel that she's going to a school where they have some challenging classes, 5. Not everyone's going to college, but at least half the students are going to a 4-year. So I actually want to skip right to her transcript because a lot of times you try to read the transcript and the school report kind of next to each other. So here we see Rachel's transcript. So, and I'll tell you, I spend a lot of time staring at people's transcripts. You may have noticed earlier, they've told us her GPA a couple different places, and I didn't say anything about it. And the reason for that is that I know that there's a lot of different ways to achieve a GPA, right? Like a 3.5 can mean an A/B student and can be a mostly A student with a couple Ds, right? So I just don't think about the GPA until I have a chance to look at what classes did you take and how did you do in them. So Varick, I know you've been pinch hitting in chat, but what are you seeing on this transcript? What is the story of this transcript?
What is the story of this transcript? So starts off strong, right? Mostly A's and B's. A C comes in 10th grade, so it's kind of like, okay, well, chemistry, kind of a hard course, not too big of a deal. And then back to A's and B's, again, back to A's and B's in 12th. What I'm really looking at above just like, GPA and above A, B, C, is actually the classes that Rachel has been taking. So there have been a few questions in the Q&A about, like how, what is rigor and like how do colleges rate rigor and, essentially how can I take rigorous classes? Rigor for a lot of classes or a lot of colleges can mean a few different things. It can mean, everything from just like honors classes, if your school offers them. It can be, in Rachel's case, like AP classes. So you can see over the course of Rachel's time in high school, first up, she took AP US History, and then she took AP French, AP Art History during her senior year. So those are all classes that we will consider to be rigorous. And usually we'll get these and then we'll kind of go and say, okay, well, how many rigorous classes in total is offered by Puget View High School, which is Rachel's high school? It's important to note, if a school offers 30 AP classes or 30 IB classes or any type of advanced coursework, right? You don't have to be taking all 30. I know specifically within Reed's office, there's this idea that we talk about called rigor within reason. And what that essentially means is that we like to see that students are pushing yourselves, but we don't want you to be absolutely just, we don't want you to be dying because of all of the rigor that's on your plate. We'd much rather see you, take a few rigorous classes and do well in them than take too many and then end up getting, C's or potentially D's in a lot of them. Keep
Absolutely.
that in mind.
Yeah. And I also think like you don't want to end up in a college that's not right for you. And so it's important to just kind of have a class schedule that represents you at your best. And for some people that's like 7 APs, but for a lot of people it isn't, right? So pick a schedule that you can succeed with. But when it comes to what Jefferson's looking for, student who's succeeding in challenging classes across the curriculum, I think just a little stumble in 10th, but we see that she turned that around. And this is a student where I wouldn't be worried about her. There will be students from other high schools who will have a lot more AP classes than her. That's true. But she took 3 out of 5 of the ones that her high school offered. She's got 4 years of her 5 solids. So 4 years of English, math, history, science, and language. So this is a student where I'm not worried about her academic preparation. And even though she does have, some B's and even C's, with this really strong class rank, that's telling me that this is, she's the 13th best student in her high school, with the combination of the rigorous classes that she's taken and the grades she's gotten. So there's some schools where getting this many B's would put you in the bottom half of the class. Clearly, that's not the case where she goes to school. So that's where all that kind of context comes into place. This is a school profile. Sometimes schools will send an additional piece of information about their school that tells you more than just the school report. So this is telling us like what classes are required, what kinds of classes do they have. Here's a kind of key one. The average ACT scores for her school is an 18. So when we look at Jefferson's score profile and we see half of the students are between 28 and 32, Rachel's 23 looks lower. But then I look at her high school and see, wow, the average student here gets an 18. So she's really crushing it compared to her peers. And then again, when you think about what we learned about this school already in terms of the kind of college going culture, college preparation, that's showing me more that while she's looking different than some of the other students we see in the Jefferson University application pool, she's a real standout in her school. Oh, and this profile gives us some different numbers, but yeah, this is a school where most students are going to community college or maybe some local universities. I'm seeing a lot of great questions. Again, we won't be able to get to everyone, but there are a lot about Reed. So we'll also, I promise we'll spend a little time at the end talking about Reed. So finally, let's read a brief teacher recommendation. So teacher recommendations, a lot of them can kind of look pretty similar from person to person. Turns out most students ask for recommendations from teachers who like them, and teachers like to be enthusiastic about those students. But here, the things that I pull out of this, she is a really good sort of high-level thinker. She participates in class in ways that move the class discussion forward. She loves learning. When she encountered difficulty, she sort of worked through that because she's both insightful and she works hard. So she's not coasting through her classes. She's a hard worker. Involved in her community, ready for a liberal arts program. That's good to know. That's what we're doing here. So strong rec, teacher likes her. Yeah, nothing out of the order here. So overall, Varick, what do you think about Rachel? You want to admit her?
Yes, but it depends. I think it's, yeah, like obviously Rachel, an amazing student, academics are great. I think her essay was really strong. And I think, the students that are with us today, a lot of you all was like, wow, she's a really good community member. Recommendation letters, amazing. They're all really strong. Activities list, again, really strong. But I think, we have to keep in mind that we don't admit students in a vacuum. We're not just responsible for reading one application and then immediately thereafter saying, yes, this person's automatically in. We kind of have to keep in mind that we have a certain number of spots available. This is for all colleges, right? There's only a certain number of students that can be admitted. And so there is a little bit of work that has to be done when it comes to, okay, well, what about the other students that we're thinking about admitting? Or what about the other students that have applied this year? So right now, yeah, I'm team Rachel all the way. But that's only because I haven't seen anybody else yet.
Absolutely. So, and I think that's an accurate representation of how we do this, is that I make a decision on the individual application in front of me as to how I feel about that application. And then we look at them as a pool later. So let's look at a second app. And we'll try to be a little zippier, since both of us like to get bogged down here. We're going to talk about Raina Roman. Varick, anything stand out to you here?
All right, Raina. First off the bat, this is something that I think is really important to notice about Raina, is that under the languages section, you can see that Spanish is Raina's first language. It's also the language that is spoken at home. Um, as well as Raina has requested a fee waiver for applying to college. So those two things, very interesting. So English is not her primary, mode of communicating, at least when she's in the comfort of her own home, which is important to note.
Excellent. Yeah, and we're also seeing this as a student with a fee waiver, so probably has had some economic challenges at home.
Mm.
Seeing two parents who were born in Mexico, so she's probably the daughter of immigrants, we would guess. And neither of her parents went to high school here. So she's a first generation student as well. We see one student went to a four-year college, two siblings went to four-year colleges, and another one went to community college.
Which is another important thing, because it does show that Raina's family does value education. So this is definitely not a family where, although she is a first generation college student, this is definitely a family that, wants to see their children go on to college.
Absolutely. And I'm actually glad we're taking a look at this education section, because this is what it looks like today. So I'm seeing this is a student who's taken a decent senior schedule, 2 AP classes, gender studies, which is not an AP, but I assume that's just a mistake. Philosophy seems good. This is a school that doesn't rank. Has a GPA of 3.23 unweighted. So that's telling me her GPA does not take into account how rigorous the classes were. But that GPA is definitely a little lower than we remember seeing in the Jefferson profile. Testing wise, I don't quite remember Jefferson's mid 50, but I think this is somewhere in there. I don't know why I'm saying I don't remember, because I do have that information, but
yeah, it's in the mid 50.
Okay, cool. So she's when a student back in the days when we did use test scores, what I would kind of think of is this student in range of a normal student that we admit? If so, I just don't think about the scores anymore. So I'm like, that's off my plate, off my brain. We also see that she did well in some subject tests. Let's take a look at activities, how she spends her time. I'll zoom out a bit. Varick, you want to do the activities analysis again?
I would love to. So one of the things I focused on with Rachel's activities list was that there were a lot of activities featured that Rachel did all 4 years. Raina, not as much, which, isn't immediately a bad thing. What's important is that, what is she actually doing with her time? And are the things that she's only done for, 1 year or a couple of years, are those things that, she could do all 4 years? So I also think it's important to note, I didn't say this with Rachel, but whatever you think is, one of the things that really showcases your biggest passion and the biggest thing that you are spending your time outside the classroom doing, make that your first activity. Obviously, it's going to be what we read first. And so, you really want to come out of the gate swinging. Like Grace said earlier, don't be afraid to brag. Bragging is a good thing, especially in the context of trying to get admitted to colleges. But Raina's bragging, about the fact that she is president of the Multicultural Awareness Club. So she's a leader in her school, which is a pretty big deal. She also does community service. Something that I didn't say last time is that Raina works part-time jobs. So please feel comfortable putting that you're working jobs in your activities list, because that's a huge endeavor to, put on top of also going to school 7 hours a day for 5 days of the week.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a student who maybe hasn't done the same set of activities or the same sort of investment in school-based activities as our prior applicant, but she's dedicated to a couple things, and she's just, 15 hours a week. That's, let's say, 3 5-hour shifts. That's 3 nights a week where you've got to get yourself to your job and work and then come back and figure out how to do homework. And it's pain. I know, because I had jobs in high school too. But this is another one where I'm noticing she starts stuff, right? She starts clubs. That doesn't mean that every student who has to start a club, but I'm always eager to see when students are sort of seeing a need and filling it. So let's take a look at this essay. I think we can zoom in. There we go. I'll give you all a moment to take a gander at this. And and Lauren brought up an important point in chat. Some students can't do 4 years of activities because they have household responsibilities or their parents have issues and can't support them. We are absolutely aware of that. There are also places in the application where you can tell us more about that. There's the additional information section and the COVID section. So there are students we admit every year with short activities lists because they've got other stuff going on in their lives. But yes, let's take a look at this essay. And when you're done, tell me what you think of the student and of the essay.
I always love this essay. I guess I should say I always love getting responses about this essay.
Yeah, I think I'm seeing some stuff that I really respond to in terms of, kind, belief in others, team worker. I think it is a good point that, she spends a lot of time talking about her parents. And sorry that we were talking while you were reading. I know that makes this a little harder. She does spend a lot of time talking about her parents. She maybe could have gone into more detail about herself or about other things, but I do think in the end, she could she have maybe done a little bit more building a bridge between here are my parents and here's how that affected me? Probably. But we're still getting some of that in our last essay on, the lessons she's learned and how she's used them to navigate her time at this school. So I'm seeing some people getting some good themes about it. I'm also seeing some criticism that I think is totally fair. And here's the thing about your essay. It adds to our understanding of you. Maybe 20% of essays get me like extra excited about a student. Maybe 20% of essays make me a little less excited. but 60% of essays are like, it does the job. You know, I learned some more about you. It's just fine. In college, you're going to have to write some essays, but that's not the most important thing. So when I'm thinking about what I'm looking for in an applicant, I'm most interested in kind of like academic ability and what you're going to contribute to our college. But I'm also keeping in mind, this is a student who may not have the most resources, whose parents probably, they never had to write college essays. And so she may not have had that many people sort of training her on how to do this or giving her advice. And I agree, Tamara, she's an observer. It provides insight into the type of person she is by what she sees. I think that's really clever. I've never thought about it that way. So.
Ooh, that's a good question. Also, English is her second language, which I think it's a valid point to note.
Yeah.
I guess the last thing I'll say is Grace, scrolled to the next section about essays, is that we want to find reasons to say yes. I think that is something that can get glossed over with college admission. I think, the goal here is not, find reasons in an application to deny a student. I think it's more about finding ways and reasons from a student's application to say yes to a student. And so even though the essay was like, obviously it spent a lot of time focusing on others, it does say, about Raina, community and, togetherness and unity and like helping out other people and the importance that other people have on her is very important to that person. It can be a lot of, reframing done, but we definitely are wanting to find a way to say, actually, even though this essay wasn't traditionally good, potentially, like there are redeeming qualities about it.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say is selective colleges, however, especially the more selective they get, a lot of their applicants are going to be really outstanding in a lot of ways. And so having an essay that is in that top 20% that is like getting us really excited about a student might be the thing that pushes a student into an admit. So you do want to do your best. And for students where English isn't their first language, we definitely do take that into account. But we also have to consider our college education is conducted in English. So I do want to see that a student is a strong enough writer that they'll be able to do the assignments that they're given here, right? That you'll be able to write a good essay in our classes. All right, but I think we agree, essay has some great points, has some things that maybe we'd like to see differently, but we learned some good things about her. That jives with what we were seeing earlier. So school report. This student goes to a very different school than our first student. 97% of students at this school go to four-year colleges, and this is a private school. So her family may not be one where there's a lot of experience in higher education, especially with her parents, but she is going to a school where most people go to college. It's also a school where only 1% of students are Hispanic, Latino, Latinx. So, and given how small it is, she might be that 1%. So that tells me a little bit about what kind of environment she has been in for the last few years. And she may have had to deal with some things that her peers didn't have to deal with, some extra challenge. We're also seeing this school has 13 AP classes. So when we look at her schedule, that'll help us understand how challenging it is. And this is closer to what the current school report looks like. Her counselor said her curriculum is demanding. So that's telling me that some students will have more challenging classes on their schedules. At her school, that might be APs. At other school, it might be IB or dual enrollment or A levels or whatever. But, there's some stronger students from this school or students taking stronger schedules, but she is still taking on some challenging classes. So here's the transcript. Yeah. So Varick, what do you draw out of this transcript?
Well, what do I draw from this transcript? Obviously, this is a story, right? There's a story that can very easily be built here of starting off with B's and C's. So freshman year, B's and C's. Sophomore year, B's, C's, a couple of A's, all right. Junior year, A's and B's. And senior year, also A's and B's, more A's than B's. In addition, what's really, interesting to note about Raina's progression is that she started off in B's and C's in, regular classes. But, by senior year, she's taking more rigorous classes. So she's taking, harder classes that require more work, more time, more effort, and is also getting A's in them, which is a huge story. And that's something that, a lot of schools will value is, growth, right? Have you been able to grow throughout high school? So even though you started off and, you got B's and C's, where did you end up? Were you able to rise to the occasion, so to speak? And even though you did, maybe not the best in the beginning, did you eventually figure out what you needed to be doing in order to do well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so this is a student where there has been this growth, and she went from C and B in some of her STEM classes early on, C's and B's, to getting an A in AP Calculus right now. That's really cool. So if I cover up the freshman year on my screen, or the top half of this, I'm seeing, oh, this is a student who's definitely prepared for college. And that's our base level question all the time is, we know that different school systems have different kinds of rigor. Again, advanced placement, IB, dual enrollment. The reason we care about how hard your classes are is we want to know that you're going to come to college and pass your classes here, right? That might seem obvious, but it's an important thing to think about. If a student, there are some schools where you don't have to take very much math. And so if a student says, great, I hate math, and they stop taking math after geometry, that's a fine life choice. But what if the college that you're going to, you're going to have to take either a math or science class, and you'll need to have at least done pre-calculus? Then we look at that and we just say, well, you're probably not going to be happy here. You're probably not going to be able to succeed academically, so you might not be a good fit. And that's not saying the thing that you did was bad or reflects or means that you're not smart or whatever. It just means that's not a good match for the way our school works. So I say that because I think it's important to think about when we're looking at a transcript, our question is not are you the perfect student, right? Because everyone is so obsessed with their GPAs and there's so much kind of negative, toxic culture around that. But we want to know that you're going to come to college and you're going to pass your classes. And the best evidence that a student's going to do well in college is doing well in hard classes in high school. So that's why we look at what classes you take that are hard, and we look at how you do. So in summary, I think Raina could hang at Jefferson University. And even though her GPA is lower than the average one at Jefferson, when we're looking at her improvement over time, this is probably, this is a student where I'm not worried about her doing well here. She might struggle initially. We can see that when she enters a new environment, maybe it's a bit hard for her, but she figured stuff out over the course of time. Here's a school profile, kind of more of what we saw earlier. Students going to a lot of different colleges, including highly selective ones. In the recommendations, what I just kind of want to pull out of here, She has a long commute to campus. She's had to learn to balance her time more than many of her peers. She's really determined to make a difference. And academics haven't always come easily to her, but she is really curious and has worked hard. So the counselor, and I also like this from the counselor. She, her grades were a little lower early on, but she never made excuses. Crucially, she met with her teachers for review when she could, and never stopped being a warm and supportive community member. So this is a student who didn't just magically get better grades. This is a student who said, I want to do things differently. I want to improve. She sought out the help she needed to do better. And that's something colleges are really interested in too, because college is going to be hard. Even if you were an amazing student in high school, like I was a pretty good student in high school, I got to college and I was like, oh, I'm a dum-dum. I don't know anything. I need a lot of help actually. But it can be really hard to admit that you need help and go get it. And so I'm actually always really happy to see a student who struggles and then figures out how to make things work. And this is the other thing that we were kind of guessing at earlier when we were looking at the demographics of her school. She came into a really different social environment. And while that may have been challenging for her, she said, I want to turn this into something good. I want to make my school a more welcoming environment for students of diverse backgrounds. And she was chosen to serve as a peer leader. So she's taken that difficulty and used that as an opportunity to make her school a more inclusive place. We love to see it. Anything else, Varick, that you kind of want to pull out from that rec? I realize I just scrolled past it.
No, I think you covered all the points. Really good. It's there's a lot of good points that are brought up in that rec. I think one of the main ones was that it's kind of going back to what we said, like the story of growth with Raina. Right, and I think especially with this rec, right, struck by intellectual capacity, passion for science, ability to make connection between classroom chemistry and reality. And then her comments and questions were perceptive and always fostered the knowledge of the group as a whole. That's a big statement, I think. And then further on, it says, not only did Raina comprehend the material readily, she assisted her classmates with their understanding. So not only is Raina a student that's doing well, but she's also helping others learn, which is a huge thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I want to make sure that we have time to do a couple more questions at the end. I don't think there's, the second rec is pretty similarly effusive. Big Raina stands here at Penrose Academy. So Varick, would you vote to admit Raina?
Yes. And maybe potentially therein lies the problem.
Yeah. So there are a lot of case study programs, at least there used to be in person, where they do this mean thing where they make you say, they give you, you read 3 or 4 different students and they say, okay, you have to admit one, waitlist one, deny 2, or something like that. And I just said that was mean, but this is a selective college. We don't get to admit all of the students that we like. We don't even get to admit all of the students that are qualified. So I'm going to launch a poll and ask you, the audience, what do you think we at Jefferson University should do? Neither of the options are deny because I don't have the heart. Ooh, this is fascinating.
Rachel was off to an early lead.
Rain is catching up. All right. I think that is all. So, wow, out of 181 of you, 150 of you are paying enough attention to do the poll. That's awesome. So here's what you all said. The admission committee is voted. Admit Rachel, waitlist Raina, slightly one out. So I'm just impressed that you still remember Rachel. That was 40 minutes ago, and this is a long webinar. So kudos to you, for all of you who have made it this far. But I think you're seeing how difficult this choice is, right? Now, the choice I just presented you is also a false choice, because in reality, in a real admission committee, what happens is let's say I'm the counselor for Washington State. I go up in front of everyone and I say, here's Rachel. Here's why I think she's awesome. Here are one of the two things that we should pay attention to, maybe her ACT score or something. But overall, I still think Rachel would be an awesome student at Reed, and we should admit her. And then I ask the people in the committee to vote, and we vote, should we admit her or not? What should we do with her? And then Varick would stand up and do the same thing for Raina. And we might all also vote to admit Raina. That's totally normal. It's not like when we're in an admission committee, we have to admit one, deny one, admit one, deny one. It doesn't work like that. Mm-hmm. What's more likely to happen is these are both great students. We're really excited about both of them. We say admit in the committee. And then later, maybe it comes back, we said yes to too many. We have too many students in the yes bucket. So then we have to go in and say, like, okay, of these students in the yes bucket, which ones are we slightly less excited about? So maybe we'll move them to the waitlist bucket. Mm-hmm. So, if you get that waitlist decision, it doesn't mean that the college doesn't think you're a great student. It just sometimes means they're looking for something slightly different. Maybe Jefferson University sees Rachel's passion for music and says, oh, we're really looking to grow our performing arts program. Rachel's what we're looking for. Or maybe they're really worried about their testing profile, and because some schools really care about keeping their test scores high. And so later on they say, we loved Rachel, but we just can't do that 23 ACT. Hopefully not. But, every school is making these decisions looking at different circumstances, right? And so again, that can feel really frustrating to you, right? Because stuff will happen to your application and you won't know why. But hopefully it can also give you the sense of peace that, like, all you can do is do your best. And if a university doesn't say yes to you, it doesn't mean you aren't a great student. It just means they were looking for something slightly different. They just didn't have enough room. Because there are a lot of awesome students every year that we don't get to say yes to. That said, there's a lot that you can do. You can write that awesome, inspiring essay, have some people look it over for you. You can make sure that you're really representing the ways you contribute to your family, your school, and the broader community in your activities list. You can explain any circumstances that might be confusing in the COVID section of the application or the additional information section. If, like, you were a varsity swimmer and suddenly all the pools are closed, you can tell us about that, and we'll take it into account. There's a lot that you still can do to make your application the best it can be. Sometimes that also includes showing that you're interested in a particular school. Jefferson University's profile said interviews are not required, but encouraged. So interviewing at schools that you're interested in can be a good way to sort of say, hey, I'm interested, and also, like, get to tell your story to an admission counselor. Get to talk about things that you're really passionate about or really interested in. So those are my closing thoughts. there's a lot going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of reasons that schools say yes and say no to applications. What you can do is do your best. And when you're really into a school, try to let that school know, whether that's by applying early decision, doing virtual events like this one, um, visiting, emailing, or calling with your admission counselor, whatever the case may be. Because, hey, everyone likes to be someone else's first choice. So, Varric, is there anything I didn't cover that you want to make sure that people know?
I think, I'll try to make this quick so we can get into like a lightning round of Q&A questions that we can answer live and more quickly. But I think it is important to note that, your college admission decisions have no bearing on your worth or importance or anything regarding that in right. So don't get caught up if you get accepted at some schools and then you get denied at other schools, right? That doesn't mean you're any better or worse of a person than anyone else. I think there's a school in this country for everyone. And sometimes it will happen where the school you thought was for you might not be it. And it turns out the school that you thought, oh, I'm just kind of applying to this school on a whim, ends up being the school that is right for you. And that was kind of my experience with Reed. So, keep that in mind. There's a lot of things going on, and it shouldn't feel like your importance as a human being is dictated by packages and letters that you might get in the mail one day.
So some lightning round questions. But first, we'll say this at the start and the beginning. You guys asked some great questions. Looks like we tried to answer 45 of them. There are 62. We're not going to get to them all. But we will give you some ways to get answers to your questions. So you can always email admission@reed.edu. That is the email that will then connect you with your admission counselor, whose whole job is to know how to help folks from your area. We are happy to answer questions there. So just looking at some questions in the chat that are a bit more general. Let's see. If a student wants to major in a certain thing, do you look more closely at their grades in that area? Varric, I'd say sometimes we do.
Yeah, I think, and this is something that I do a lot. Like if I see a student that is, applying to Reed, interested in studying biochemistry, right? I did that. I know what it takes. And so kind of going back to what Grace was saying earlier about like, yeah, we want to see that you've taken certain levels of like, math classes if we know that what you're about to head into is going to require a lot of intense math. So it doesn't mean that, you automatically get knocked out of the running if you haven't taken certain classes in high school, but, and this comes into context with like, you're applying to like the School of Biology for a big university, or at a liberal arts college, you're applying for, biochemistry. We will kind of weigh what you have done in the past, what you're preparing to do in the future. Good question.
Absolutely.
This is a good one.
Go ahead.
There are certain essay topics students should potentially avoid writing about.
Oh, first, Leah said something nice. She said both of our hairstyles are immaculate. I humbly must disagree. Mine could be better, but Varric that is indeed true. But let's see. No essay topics we don't recommend. Let's see. So there are a lot of things out there like don't write about this or don't write about that. almost everything that people tell you not to write about can be done well. Like people say, oh, don't write the dead grandma essay, which sounds kind of harsh. I'd say if you have a great story to tell about a relative of yours that really inspired you and how they changed who you want to be or how you interact with the world, definitely write about that. But don't either focus so much on the tragedy that I'm just kind of like bummed out, and don't focus so much on the other person that I don't get to know you, right? We saw that a little bit with Raina. The other one, I don't want to read about, as one of my former coworkers used to put it, boyfriend, girlfriend stuff. I don't want to, like, there's some students for whom their personal story intersects with, maybe learning things about their sexuality or gender identity. And I think that's fine. And that might be a really important story for you to tell. But like, think about the admission officer reading your essay as like your favorite teacher. You might be a little bit more informal with your favorite teacher, but there's some stuff that you're not going to tell them, right? That they just don't want to know. So think of us kind of at that level when it comes to sharing personal details. Eric, do you have any other kind of topic advice?
I will say, I'll plug a future event, which I'm sure we're going to do, which is Reed does an essay writing workshop. And we're starting to be doing one, potentially more than one this fall. Certainly we're going to be doing one before our first deadline for applications, which is November 15th. So you will be getting, tons of communication from us about upcoming events. So keep a lookout on the essay writing workshop and what date that will be. I've been told by a lot of different students, it's very helpful for them writing their essays.
Excellent. We do love the positive feedback. So how does applying early decision affect your admission decisions? Schools are a lot more likely to admit students in early decision for a variety of reasons. But just like you really want schools to say yes to you, we really want students to say yes to us. So when we have a student who is so excited about Reed that they're saying, you are my top choice, I promise to go if you admit me, I'm like, great. If this is a student that I'm excited about, that's a good student that I think will do well here, I'll just be like, great, decision done, easy peasy. Because that just makes our job easier too, right? So I wouldn't say don't apply early decision if you're not certain that you be excited to attend that school. But if there's a school that you're really into that is your number one, that you feel comfortable, like, yeah, I want to go there if they say yes to me, then ED is a great option because at most schools, it will give you a higher chance of being admitted. You have an independent YouTube channel, Kip? That sounds super cool. Please send us a link. Oh yeah, if you do cool stuff, if you have an art portfolio, if you have an Instagram of your like nail art, I still remember that one from 4 years ago. If you have a YouTube channel or make sure if you have a TikTok, everything's appropriate, but whatever it is, if you have a link to something cool that you do, again, think of what you would share with maybe like your favorite teacher, but definitely feel free to share it with colleges. I love looking at that stuff. I think it's so much fun. Let's see. Are there caps on STEM majors at Reed? Reed doesn't have caps on majors. Other schools sometimes do. We don't, because every student at Reed is actually technically undecided until the end of their sophomore year. That doesn't mean you can't study what you want to study until the end of your sophomore year, but you have 2 years to be sure that you want to major in whatever it is, so that when you then declare your major, you're certain that that's where you want to be. Yeah, you can submit it at LinkedIn. That would be fine. Will there be more sessions like this? Absolutely. We love doing these sort of workshop, educational kinds of sessions. So I know you all get a lot of email, but if you keep opening ours, we'll always be telling you what our next event is. And we do, I'd say 1 or 2 kind of workshops per month about essay writing, about interviews, all kinds of stuff. And then up near the top, I think Leah asked if we could talk about the Paideia supplement. Eric, take it away. I've been talking too much.
For a lot of schools like Reed, there is something called a supplemental essay. So if you apply using the Common Application, there's an essay that you have to write as a part of the Common Application portion. And then for Reed in a lot of schools, we ask you to write an additional essay. And the essay we ask you to write is called the Paideia essay. It is named after a tradition that happens every year on campus where any community member can teach a class on anything that they want, or almost anything. There's some limits, but almost anything that they would like to. And so we ask you, what would you teach a class on? It doesn't have to be anything, strictly academically related. So, I mean, if you want to teach a class on how to make, I don't know, quantum dots, you can do that. If you want to teach a class on how to make the perfect, I don't know, gazpacho, that is also an option. I want to teach a class this year on just like basic automotive maintenance. Me and my friends want to teach a class on representations of masculinity in rap culture. So the big thing is that make sure it's something that you are passionate about. That's really the most important reason that essay exists. And that we want to see, what are you curious about? What are you excited about? How would you go about sharing your knowledge with other people? Because that's a huge part of being a Reed.
Awesome.
Oh man! Again,
we're also getting some good questions about writing portfolios and portfolios of stuff. Art, it's pretty easy to look at a lot of it. Writing, Derek, how many applications you would say you read on a good day during reading season?
I don't know. I can tell you how many applications I read in total.
How many did you read total?
I think around 1,250, somewhere around there. Yeah, probably more, honestly.
Yeah, I'd say my best year, I probably read about 1,300, maybe a little more.
Yeah, and every application has 2 essays.
Yeah, and a good day for me. The best day I ever had was 40 applications in one day. A good day is like 20. Yeah, I know, 40 was wild. It only happened once. So if you're going to send us in extra writing, you definitely can, but like pick 1 or 2 pieces, maybe 3 if they're short. Pick the best poem that you wrote, not all the poems that you wrote, right? Because I want to understand what you're all about, but I've got a lot of students where I'm trying to understand that. So pick the thing that you would most want someone to see to understand you as an author or a journalist or a poet or whatever. But yes, I love, we also got some questions about Nail Art Insta, who's a very nice young man that I met. Let's see. Oh, we are over time. So I've had so much fun with you guys. I really enjoyed the chat and keeping an eye. Apparently there's a change.org petition going to have AP Gender Studies. So Reedies changing the world before they're even Reedies. We love to see it. And I'm just really excited to see you all apply to maybe Reed, maybe somewhere else. And I hope this was helpful in writing your best applications. Again, I will plug admission@reed.edu, admission@reed.edu. And I know there were questions that we didn't get to. Please email us. And we will, one of our admission counselors will be happy to help you out. Otherwise, best of luck. Have a wonderful evening or day wherever you are. We're rooting for you.
Yeah, y'all got this. You're amazing. Don't forget it.
Don't forget it.
And we look forward to reading your applications. So definitely send them in.
All right. Bye, guys.